in my summary. But welcome, Macdara.
Thanks, Rory. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. So what I loved about your talk was it's a real world, tangible example of how you can't plan for everything. Because if I take the Wi-Fi example, there was one SO station that had bad Wi-Fi, and that was causing lots of problems. Like that's just not something you're going to whiteboard about. Maybe eventually you'd come up with it, but it's those kind of things in the real world that go wrong.
Yeah, it was a good anecdote. I think for the kind of random stuff that can happen in those, like I said, I've spent most of my career doing, more what we call e-commerce. So you're booking something online, and for example, I worked in the travel business for a long time. Booking flights, hotels. You're not actually going to be there for at least usually 2-3 weeks, if not months, and especially nowadays. And there's lots of time for mistakes to be corrected, etc. But as I said on the talk, with a product, especially like food or fuel or something like that, like where it's kind of, you can't really give it back as such. There's no returns policy, but some of the stuff we do. So you're looking at a digital experience that really blends into an overall customer experience. So it's nice in that you get to work really closely with customer care, and you've kind of got a real world sense of buildings and funny kind of things that can happen. Traffic jams can build up, or even for our field testers, they can get on the wrong side of either the customers or the actual staff in the stations.
So let's jump into actually field testing. So you set up this kind of field testing unit. How did you staff that with people and just tell them you're in the office most days of the week, but one day of the week you're out, or how did you build that team?
Yeah, so we because we're a big company, Fiserv has about 45,000 employees, but primarily, in the larger countries, most of the staff are in places like UK, Germany, US. So we wouldn't have people everywhere. So we had to look at this, and it was tricky. So we eventually figured out, using just your kind of generic IT support, small providers has been the way we've solved it. So we've got typically guys happen to be, but the people who go out and fix your printers and get you new laptops and all that, small IT support providers. We've worked with them across different regions, because what you want to do is get somebody, as you can imagine, it's a bit like user testing. You want somebody who speaks the language, who is actually like a real consumer, who understands what's going on locally, and can report issues that a person, like if you fly me over to Germany, I mightn't spot a lot of the kind of issues that are happening, like that don't seem right or that seem a bit off. So yeah, we've used kind of local providers in different markets and set up a kind of internal function to manage that then centrally out of Ireland, which is nice.
Excellent. And how successful has it been? Like, how many items have they picked up? So you kind of finished saying you're making this a permanent thing. So talk me through the success.
It's great. I mean, it's critical to this, because again, you can't really, we all complain about test environments all of our lives, but you can't really represent what can happen in the field in these kinds of products and channels, like in a test environment. It's just not possible. So we have finds all the time, like literally weekly basis. We find things in our field testing, and then we refine the kind of field testing program and a release strategy around that. So I mean, in terms of even involve myself, like you can do a certain degree of field testing remotely from other locations as well. Obviously, we call it desk testing in production, but we would allow kind of 1 to 2 weeks before each app release of field testing. And like I said, we do find subtle kind of issues where maybe a receipt isn't displaying properly for a certain person, or a certain user, for example, who has onboarded maybe a year or two ago, is experiencing an issue with their account when they upgrade to the app, which typically wouldn't be found in, this kind of turned into a QA talk, but it wouldn't be found in testing, because mostly when people are testing, they're using relatively new accounts. So if you've got a kind of a legacy account with lots of baggage and history, you won't really find, those kinds of issues in test environments, because they typically get wiped quite frequently. So yeah, it really helps to kind of give you that, avoid those big kind of production incidents. We find it quite effective, and like I said, it's a key part of our product strategy, because we weren't doing this maybe in the past, a couple of years back, and it was really biting us, because you were going into the unknown and finding out, as my slide says, getting punched in the face by things you never thought would happen, and then having to respond, you're on the back foot. So at least this way, you find out these issues, you maybe create a new build and resolve them, investigate them. But we really had to up our game, on debugging and logging, especially with the field test. We have special debug builds that generate more logs and stuff like that. So it's
Right. And are you kind of looking at everything that you spot in the field? How did that slip through in your other processes and trying to automate there?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So again, it's kind of a bit more of a techie focus on this talk, and I'm not an engineer. I'm like one of the earlier speakers, background is in economics and that area, but and UX. But it's in terms of the software life cycle, you're right. It's you're always thinking how, and people, I suppose, classically minded, thinking, how do I get this back down? People say to the left of the delivery cycle, how do I automate these tests? So that's probably the next part of our journey, is how do we, look into what we can do. But I don't think it'll ever be a situation where you say, well, okay, we've got so much coverage now back downstream that we don't need to do field testing. And we'll have people like electric vehicles will be coming through and charging, and lots of different new things, new products, and you're always going to need to field test, I think, with something like this, to make sure. It's quite complex, and in the current product is about 50 vendors involved. It's across multiple countries, thousands of people just working on it. So there's lots of things that can happen, low level problems. So yeah, I think we'll have to look at, maybe, like you said, how do you identify up front? Like, you don't want to find those the last minute. They're expensive to fix when you're already in production, but it's much more expensive, as I said, when you release these kind of things to the consumers, and then you have customer care lighting up with complaints. So yeah, it's going to be the next horizon. I think the next challenge for us is to try and automate some of this.
Great. Now, thanks for your time. Like, it was great just kind of seeing, because there's that example you gave of the travel, where you've got time to fix it if something goes wrong, versus somebody standing there trying to pay for their petrol. You don't have any time. Like, they're causing traffic to build up behind them.
Yeah, and you can end up driving away without paying if things go the wrong way. So it has risks.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, thanks very much for your time. Really enjoyed that. And I hope you had a good time as well. And reminder again to everybody, use the Ask the Speakers